Hey guys, Chris here. So, exciting news with the Z06. Alright guys, 124,999. About to cross over 125,000 in the Z06. It's been raining, now it's starting to stop raining. I'm on my way to get the car aligned over in Cleveland because I have a track day coming up next week. And then I have an autocross coming up 2 weeks after that. So, I'm going to capture the moment. There it is, 125,000 miles. Like it has 125,000 miles on it. Feels perfectly fine for its age. So the Z06 now has 125,000 miles on it. I've put about 1,000 of those miles on it because I had it when I bought it. It had just over 124,000 on it. I'm not scared of high mileage vehicles at all, so I wasn't really that concerned with getting a high mileage Z06. My thought process was kind of along the lines of a car that has higher miles on it and has been driven, has probably been maintained better, and any issues and things that have broken along the way have probably been fixed, and it's probably been maintained better than a car that's just sat in a garage for 15 years, has never really been driven. So that's kind of my thought process. Like I said, I'm not scared of high mileage vehicles. So, well, it's now 125,000, and I figured to celebrate that, I would make a video and I would talk about all the problems that I have found with the car. Because, so I bought the car in October last year, it's now July. Over the winter, I basically took it all apart and did a whole bunch of work to it and did a bunch of checking of things and stuff because I plan on using it for track days and autocross and drag racing and stuff. So I wanted to go over the car before I did a lot of those things with it. So in this video, I'm going to go over all the problems I've found with the car so far and all the things I've fixed, and then I'll talk about a couple things that I still have to work on. I figure there's probably other people that might be interested in buying a high mileage Z06, so it'd be good to share my experiences with what I found on this car so far, considering I had it completely apart this winter. So let's grab my laptop and I will go over all the things I have found or fixed with this car. So the big thing basically that I found is that it has a ton of leaks. The engine has a ton of leaks. The transmission, the diff, has a ton of leaks. The engine, there's leaks on the front of it. There's leaks on the sides of it. There's leaks on the back of it. The valve covers were both covered in oil and grime. So there's just a lot of leaks. That's probably the biggest thing I've noticed with the engine. Over the winter, I replaced the rear main cover and the rear main seal, which should have addressed the leaks at the back of the engine. I haven't really had a chance to get up there and look that closely yet, but I don't see anything dripping on the floor like it was before, so I think I fixed the leaks on the back of the engine. However, there's still the sides and the front of the engine. My plan for this coming winter is to replace the harmonic balancer and some other stuff on the front of the car. So because I'm going to have the whole front of the car apart, I'm going to work on more of those leaks. I think there's a front main seal or something like that that's leaking. It kind of looks like the oil pan gasket is leaking. I've read some stuff that says that's not likely to happen, but it does look like there is leaking around where the oil pan gasket is. I know one common thing with these cars is the oil pressure sensor to leak, but I did verify that that is fine, is not leaking, so that's good at least. I definitely noticed with the car is that there's a ton of leaks on the front of the engine. Like the whole engine is just caked in oil. So, but it doesn't really seem to burn oil, so I don't know if it's like slow leaks or what. While I had everything apart and did my work this winter, I replaced the oil galley plug with a billet aluminum one, supposedly better filter oil. I replaced pilot bearing, clutch, flywheel, pressure plate. I rebuilt the torque tube with all new bearings and seals and stuff. I have a video on that. I'll put a link to it. There wasn't really anything wrong with it. I wanted to install a remote bleeder line for the slave cylinder, and I had everything apart, so I figured I would do the clutch and rebuild the torque tube while I had everything apart. I removed the air system, which is just an emissions thing that I didn't want on there anymore. I also have a video on that. Cleaned as much of the engine as I could. There were some rubber hoses I broke, replaced. They're, just brittle rubber hoses. I already said the rear main cover, the rear main seal. The fuel gauge wasn't working when I bought the car, which is a common thing. Sulfur contaminates it and then it doesn't work. Since I had everything apart, I dropped the passenger fuel tank over the winter and cleaned the inside of it and cleaned the sensor and everything. I measured the sensor with a multimeter. Everything looked fine, so I just put it back together and ran some tech run through it. It actually just started working yesterday, finally. So I think the tech run is finally starting to get the fuel gauge to work. But that's not really a condition of the age. Those sensors go bad because of gas, not really because of age. So that's not really a high mileage thing. I put an external oil cooler on the car because I plan on doing track days and stuff with it. See. The differential and the transmission also were very bad with leaks. I'll put some pictures in of how I found it when I started digging into the car, but they were just completely caked with leaks. I think I identified like 5 or 6 different possible ways or possible sources of leaks on. I think I have a leak from every single source. So if you're looking at a higher mileage Z06, definitely look for leaks both at the engine and the transmission diff combo, because mine leaks everywhere. I fixed a little bit of the leaks in the rear of the car. Between the transmission and the extension housing, I think I fixed that leak, and I replaced the driver's side O-ring that goes around the cover on the differential, and then I replaced both axle seals. Again, I haven't really got under there yet to look at it that closely, but it does seem to, just from what I can see from outside the car, it looks like it did fix the leaks. So I have more stuff planned for this coming winter to take care of all of them. I found some wiring that was a little burnt up from the headers. It has aftermarket headers, so I had to, one of the oxygen sensor plugs was kind of sitting on the header, so I'm working on that. I also found that it's all in that like black corrugated plastic tubing. That's kind of all brittle and falling apart, which is 17-year-old plastic tubing. Of course, it's going to get brittle and fall apart. The vehicle speed sensor, which is on top of the differential, a mouse, I think, chewed through the wires on it. It was working and everything, and then when I took the car apart, I noticed what looked like a cut wire. So I was like, that's really weird. Why would a wire be cut under here? But then I think looking at it closer, it looks like it was a mouse chewed it apart. So I had to replace the pigtail for that vehicle speed sensor, which wasn't a big deal. You can get one at AutoZone for a Silverado for like $11. That's the same plug. I found 3 mouse nests on the car, 1 by the intake manifold and 2 on top of the differential. That, I think, is a product of having just, a car like this that sits a lot in garages and doesn't get driven a whole lot. So I cleaned all those out. I did a bunch of tune-up things, new spark plugs, new spark plug wires, cleaned the throttle body, cleaned the air filter, cleaned the MAF sensor, I had the fuel injectors out for something else, so I cleaned them and put new O-rings and stuff on them. So just basic tune-up things like that. Going along with the torque tube and clutch project, I put a new slave cylinder on the car, and I put a remote bleeder line, which will be essential for doing track days and stuff, because that system tends to get contaminated with dust from the clutch, and it's impossible to bleed it because the bleed screw is on top of the torque tube, which is basically behind the radio, so it's not practical to get to. So I put a remote bleeder line on, it should have come that way from the factory, but now my car's got it. That was kind of the trigger for doing this whole winter project. I replaced the gaskets for the headers. It has aftermarket long tube headers, and the gaskets that were in there were the original ones, which are not supposed to be used with aftermarket headers, so I got the correct gaskets for that. The original gaskets were also delaminating. They looked like they were the original gaskets. Oh, another thing I did that was a big thing I found was, in preparation for driving on track, I did a nut and bolt check of all the front and rear suspension components, and every single one I checked was loose. No joke. Yeah, the front sway bar bolts were loose, the front subframe was loose, the front leaf spring bolts were loose, the tie rod in nuts were loose, control arm mounting bolts were loose, upper and lower control arm bolts, shock bolts on the front. Yeah, pretty much all the nuts and bolts on the suspension, which are important, were loose. Now when I say loose, they weren't like finger tight about to fall off loose, but they were not torqued to spec. They were probably 75 to 80% of what the torque spec was, meaning if they were supposed to be torqued to 100 foot-pounds, they were only actually like 75 or 80 foot-pounds. So that is a big thing. I think if you're looking at a higher mileage car, expect to find suspension components that are loose. But that's just a general thing with a car, with a high performance car like this. You should go through and check things are tight. You should, like my race car here, I do a nut and bolt check before every single race weekend, and I find stuff loose. With a higher performance car like this, that should be just something you do. You should check everything to make sure it's tight. But I will note that I did find a bunch of stuff loose, and pretty much everything needed torque to spec. That I didn't talk about that I found was the air conditioning system has several leaks. Both the high pressure line and the low pressure line, the Schrader valves on those lines are both look like they're leaking a little bit. They're one of the lines, I think it's the high pressure line where it joins together. I think there's an O-ring in there that's old and deteriorating. So I saw refrigerant there, and then underneath the driver's, underneath the passenger side of the engine, I think where like the air conditioning compressor is. Also, I could see some refrigerant leak there. So the air conditioning still works actually really well in this car. Of all the cars we have, this might actually be the coldest air conditioning. Yeah, who would have thought that a 17-year-old Corvette would have the coldest air conditioning of all the cars we have? And our other cars, we have 2 Japanese cars, for example. So I'm pretty impressed with the air conditioning in this car. It still works, but it does have several leaks on it. So at some point, I think I'm going to have to work on that and fix the sources of those leaks. Yeah, that's pretty much the biggest thing. Leaks. I think leaks is the theme of this video. Engine oil leaks, transmission leaks, differential leaks, air conditioner leaks. Those are really the biggest things with the car. It drives really well, it's really solid, feels really powerful. It honestly doesn't feel like it has 125,000 miles. There's some creaks and rattles inside, but it's a 2004 Chevy. What do you expect? I had a 2010 Yukon Denali, which creaked and rattled too. So that's just GM vehicles. They're crappy plastic interiors. They rattle. They squeak. It's it's not a high mileage car's fault. It's just it's an old Chevy. They all do that. But yeah, that's pretty much it. Everything works, I think. I can't think of anything that doesn't work. The heads-up display still works. All the interior things, the windows, the air conditioner, I never listened to the radio, but I think I tried it once or twice. I think it still works. Everything basically works. It's a solid, well taken care of car, it seems like. Um, yeah, I did a bunch of work to it this winter, but most of that wasn't needed. It was just preventative things, and I was in there doing something. So here's 15 other things I can work on while I'm in here. Things still to work on. It has a check engine light, but that's just because it doesn't have catalytic converters, and it needs to be tuned out. It needs those oxygen sensors tuned out. So I have an appointment at the end of this month to get that done. Now that my fuel gauge is working, that warning light went away. So the only warning light I have is that check engine light for the cats. Yeah, I mean, it's a pretty solid car. Which is the reason why I bought it. It was solid and well taken care of. So, and I fixed a bunch of the little things that it had wrong with it this winter. Plans for next winter, or well, things that are wrong with it, I'll say. Right now, it does have like a little bit of a ticking sound in the engine between 1500 and 2000 RPM, which is noticeable most in like 3rd and 4th, 5th gear. 6th gear, I don't hear it at all, but it does kind of tick a little bit. I did some reading on the forums, and it sounds like that's kind of common, and I can't really remember if it did that last year or not. So I don't know. It seems kind of common, but it's something you might want to look for when you're looking for cars. It does sound like, though, I'm starting to have like a pulley, or maybe like an idler pulley or something starting to go bad, because I'm kind of starting to hear a whine from the engine that sounds like a belt or a pulley. So yeah, that's pretty much a summary of my 125,000 mile Z06 Commemorative Edition. I don't know if this is the highest mileage one out there or not. I've been watching around on Facebook, a couple different groups, and I haven't seen anybody, I don't believe I've seen anybody post one that has higher mileage than this one. But if you do, if you have a Z06 Commemorative Edition with more than 125,000 miles, definitely let me know, because I'd be curious to see what the highest mileage one is. But for right now, I have not seen one that's got more miles than this, which is kind of cool. Like I said, I'm not scared of high mileage. It's fun. The car still drives perfectly fine. You can't really tell. I mean, if you just got in the car and drove it and didn't look at the odometer, you wouldn't really know it has that many miles on it. It's solid. It's fast. So I'm pleased with it. Yeah, it has some problems, but the biggest thing really, like I said, is just the leaks. Engine leaks, trans diff leaks, which are probably just seals and gaskets and stuff that are just deteriorating with age. Next thing I have coming up is a track day in a couple days at Pittsburgh Raceway. So finally going to get the car on a racetrack and see how it does. And then in like 2 weeks or so, I have an autocross I'm going to go to. So I'm going to do the track day, then the autocross, and then I'm going to get the car tuned and get rid of the check engine light. Hopefully I'll pick up a little bit of power too. And then in August, I plan on going back to the drag strip and try to lower my drag time. So that's pretty much it. Thanks for checking out my video. Hopefully it was informative and you learned something about what to expect if you have a Z06 that's getting up there in miles, or if you're looking to get one and you're looking at a higher mileage one, what you should expect. So thanks. I'll keep updating things as it goes and I find more problems, or if I don't find more problems, we'll see. Pretty much it. Thanks. Have a good night. Bye.